AMN DriveTime is sponsored by Aishin, your trusted and reliable source for aftermarket automotive components and technology. Visit AishinAftermarket.com for more information.
Rick, welcome to AMN DriveTime, sponsored by our great friends at Aishin.
Thanks, Bill.
Glad to be with you. For the benefit of our audience, you and I are sitting in Greater Detroit at the Vision Conference 2026, and we're glad you could take some time out of your busy schedule to join us today.
Well, thanks for inviting me. Glad to be here.
So this is our second drive time.
Yes, it is.
We had a drive time in late 2023.
Has it been 3 years already?
Right. Well, yeah.
Almost.
Yeah. And at the time, Rick, you talked about how Schwartz Advisors was born. And I do think, just for the benefit of our audience, to remind our audience how the company came about. Clearly, Schwartz is a very famous name in the aftermarket. And why don't you tell us how it all got started?
Yeah, so my dad, Mort Schwartz, and I started the company in 2008. Hard to believe it's been 18 years.
Wow.
And my dad has been a fixture in the aftermarket for a long time. He owned a big WD in California, and he ended up selling that WD. And then he ended up doing 2 roll-ups of other WDs. So he was rolling up WDs before it was a thing. And I worked in his company. I worked in the warehouse when I was growing up and going to school. But my dad told me, hey, there's a no nepotism policy here, so you got to find a job when you graduate from school. So I did. About 20 years later, after I had worked in a couple of different companies outside the aftermarket, I was living in San Diego. He called me up and he said, I got an idea. He said, I want to start a company that helps aftermarket companies and private equity firms work in the aftermarket. And that company never existed when I owned businesses in the aftermarket. I was always looking for someone who can help me, who knew how to run an aftermarket company. So let's start it together. So we did. So we got started in 2008, right before everything melted down in September. Not a great time to start an M&A advisory firm, but we survived. And here we are 18 years later with a great team in place, doing M&A advisory work with PEs, working with a lot of aftermarket companies, and that's the short story. So
Rick, with Schwartz Advisors, you're in the M&A business, among other things, because you do consulting and research and you play a lot of roles. But as it relates to the M&A, are you guys mostly on the buy side, the sell side? Are you on both sides? How do you guys do that?
Yeah, we're on both the buy side and the sell side. We never work on buy and sell side on the same transaction. Sell side's the biggest part of our business, and that's where we act as the agent helping our clients sell their company. And we've completed close to 40 transactions since we started this practice. Now, on the buy side, we work with both private equity firms and aftermarket companies as part of their due diligence team, and we help them analyze potential acquisitions and help them determine whether or not it's a good fit for the client.
Well, you guys have a great, well-earned, stellar reputation, right?
Thank you.
Appreciate that. I know you're well aware.
Appreciate that. So,
if you could, to start off, why don't you provide some highlights of your new VIO forecast report titled the SA Mobility Aftermarket Report, which we've had the pleasure of working with you guys a little bit on.
Yeah, back in 2018-19 timeframe, we started to develop a VIO forecast. And it was actually started by my partner, Derek Kaufman. Derek's one of the managing partners at Schwartz Advisors. And we started to look at the VIO and forecast out where it was going. And then over time, we added a lot of new elements to this. We started to look at the VIO by powertrain because we realized it's actually misleading to look at the VIO in aggregate and just look at, well, today it's close to 290 million vehicles and say, where things going? You really need to look at the VIO by powertrain. Look at the internal combustion engines. All the different kinds of hybrids are separate powertrains, EVs, even AVs. And as we started to add more variables to this to try and tighten up the accuracy of the forecast, it occurred to us that there are a lot of structural changes going on in the industry, and the VIO by powertrain forecast helps us to identify what some of the changes are. The VIO is growing slowly. So even though it's not growing at a very fast clip, the average age is going up, which is a big consideration for aftermarket companies and investors in the industry. But the composition of the VIO is changing dramatically. We're seeing more hybrids today. Even though EV sales are down, they're going to probably come back, at least in the short term. And over time, AVs are going to take over. And as, not take over, let me rephrase that, autonomous vehicles are going to become more prevalent. And all those changes in the VIO composition are changes that aftermarket companies, investors in the industry need to be aware of. And this report really lays out our thoughts on where things are going. And we have a projection that takes us out to 2050. And it's not a linear look at the world, it's how things are going to change in increments.
So Rick, with the VIO forecast report, for the benefit of our audience, how can people get a copy of that?
Well, there's a link on Aftermarket News.
Okay.
And if you just click on the link and you give your contact information, you'll get a download of it. And we'd love it if people do that. We'd like to hear what our audience has to say about this report.
Rick, when you mention AV, out of curiosity, is there an argument that AVs would be great for the aftermarket under the headline of there may be no such thing as under or unperformed maintenance because the car would just drive itself to get fixed whenever it needs anything? Is that an argument, or is that just like a pipe dream?
You know, it's an argument. Let me also add a few other considerations. It really depends on how the AV is being used. So if it's just someone like us as a consumer, I decide to have an AV, the amount of maintenance is probably not going to be that much different than your current car. But what we're finding is a lot of the AVs are going to be used in fleets,
right?
Whether it's you know, the rideshare apps, you know, Uber and Lyft today, and who knows what's coming down the pike, Waymo. So a lot of those AVs actually could rack up a lot more miles in a given year. The average car is putting on about 12,000 miles a year.
Yep.
But if AVs put on even 15,000 miles, you know, just a couple thousand more, 15,000 miles a year, or even 20,000 miles a year, a lot more wear and tear and a lot more opportunities for the aftermarket.
Have you been in an AV yet?
I've been in a Waymo once.
My son was in one in San Francisco. He said it was fantastic.
That's where I was in Waymo in San Francisco. Now, I used to live in San Francisco long before there were AVs, and driving in San Francisco is not for the faint of heart. It is not easy because it's a very compact city.
Yeah.
You got the hills. And so to get into a Waymo where it's an AV, you know, it was a big gulp in terms of, okay, but I got from point A to point B, and I'll use it again.
So Schwartz Advisors, Rick, has a what's hot, what's next quarterly report, detailing trends in the mobility aftermarket. What are your plans for this report moving forward?
Well, let me tell you how we got here, and then we can talk about where we're going. So the idea for this came actually at Apex a couple of years ago, where we met with a couple of private equity firms, as we usually do when we're at Industry Week. And the same question was asked by every PE we met with. They said, where's the industry going? What should we be thinking about? Essentially, they were saying, what's next? So it's easy to look at current deal flow that's out there and just know, okay, this company's for sale, this company's for sale. But the real question isn't what's for sale today, it's what's going to be up on the market tomorrow, where are the trends, what should we be thinking about? So we walked away from Apex a couple of years ago and said, hey, we need to put together a report where we're looking out in the future, both near term and long term, and be able to go back to the private equity community primarily and say, this is where we think the M&A markets are going. We're looking at everything from some of the macro factors that affect M&A activity, things like interest rates and things that are not specific to a company. But we started to look at where we think the M&A activity is going to take place in terms of segments of the industry. And it gives us a chance to talk to the PEs. And from there, we started to talk to some of the aftermarket companies about where things are going, because a lot of the M&A activity is also done by aftermarket companies. It's not just done by private equity firms. So this report has given us an opportunity to talk about where we see things going and what are we going to do with it. You know, Bill, it's interesting. As we've started to look at where things are, you know, it's like the Wayne Gretzky quote. I don't skate to where the puck is, I skate to where the puck is going.
Sure.
The what's next report is really where's the puck going in the aftermarket? What are some of the underserved markets that might benefit from mergers and acquisition, either by PEs or aftermarket companies? So that's really what we're looking for is, you know, where are things going that maybe are not readily apparent to people who are tracking it.
Do you have any high-level thoughts on what the PE guys are thinking about the aftermarket right now?
Well, I'll give you my 2 cents on this, and then it'd be interesting what the PE guys have to say. Obviously, the macro factors like interest rates, like just some of the geopolitical issues out there are a concern, but those are relatively short-term in nature. So the PEs are looking over the long term. How can they look for the right businesses to buy that are a good fit for their fund? And then can they make a difference, a positive difference in that company? So some of the trends that we're talking to the private equity firms about are things like supply chain issues. And that has led us to look at the salvage world, which we think is very interesting, auto salvage and recycling, because it's a huge market. There are a couple of private equity owned salvage and recycling companies, and it creates some opportunities for companies to get into a business, build it up, and help the aftermarket with some supply chain where you don't have to source every product from outside of the US. Because these are vehicles in the US that just get dismantled, cleaned up, remanufactured, refurbished. We think that's a really interesting trend that a lot of private equity firms will be interested in the coming years.
You do this for a living, but I'd be curious for our audience, what's your outlook for the aftermarket for 2026 and 2027? I guess you're doing VIO out to 2050.
Yeah.
So, but just in the next 18 months, 6 to 18 months, what do things look and feel like to you?
Let me get my crystal ball out and let me tell you what I can see. We're in a choppy period right now, and a lot of people don't like to hear that because, you know, for whatever reason they don't like to hear it. But the reality is there are a lot of headwinds that are working against us in the aftermarket. There are a lot of tailwinds that are in our favor, and that's why we have the choppiness. So the things that are working in our favor, vehicle miles traveled has remained steady, even going up a little bit. There's some talk with the spike in gas. What's that going to mean to vehicle miles traveled? We'll probably find out in a couple months if there's any decline, you know, the summer travel time. But we're seeing that the average age of vehicles is up. That's good for the aftermarket.
Yep.
The average price of new vehicles is up dramatically. If you look at Kelley Blue Book, which I think we're all familiar with, it's a division of Cox Auto. You know, they came out with a report earlier this year, and they said the price of new vehicles are up 3.5% year over year. So when you're looking at new cars that are close to a $50,000 price tag, a lot of people are not going to buy new cars. They're going to keep their car. That's good for the aftermarket. So some of the deferred maintenance is going to get done. More of the repair and service work is going to get done. So we think that people holding onto their vehicles is good for the industry. We talked about first brands. You know, that's also good for the aftermarket once that situation settles down and companies fill the gaps in terms of the supply chain. So there's some positive factors. You know, we're seeing a lot of skittishness in the markets now that are related to what's going on around the world. As some of the various situations around the world settle down, you'll probably see more M&A activity coming online. Now, some of the things working against us are inflation. Inflation had come down quite a bit, and as of February this year, it was down a lot, you know, from where it was maybe 2-3 years ago. It's spiking up again because of gas, so that's working against us. So those are the pros and cons, but overall, I think, Bill, we're going to see an okay year in 2026. You're going to see some companies that are doing terrific. You're going to see some companies with challenges. Some of the big companies are getting bigger and stronger. That's hurting some of the smaller companies that don't have the ability to compete. So we have a lot of these forces that are both pro and con, which is why I think this is going to be a little bit of a tough year, but an okay year. But we see things really coming back a lot stronger in 2027.
New cars are expensive.
Yeah.
My son has lived in New York for the last 12 years. He's moving to Ohio. He's going to buy a car. It's the first time he's bought a car in 12 years. A RAV4 is like $40,000.
Yeah.
It's not a fancy car, I don't think. It's a nice car, but it's not a fancy car. I think that's an expensive vehicle, right? 40 grand for a car?
It is an expensive price for a car. Look, I leased a car in 2024, and I thought I was only going to have it for 3 years. That's why I leased it. I know what the buyout's going to be, and I was just thinking about this the other day. I was thinking, depending on what the situation is in about 12 months, I might just buy the car coming off lease, because that might be a better deal for me than buying a new car.
Right.
Or leasing a new car.
Yeah. You also see these articles about inflation. If you look at the price of gas per gallon,
Yeah.
inflation adjusted, you see this argument where it's not that bad. You hear $4 or whatever, at least in Ohio. I don't know what it is in California. It's probably $8 in California, right? But they say inflation adjusted, it's not that bad. So I'm curious, like you say, another 90 days and they look back at the miles driven. I wonder if it'll be really affected.
People have to move around.
They do.
Whether it's commuting to work, taking care of just taking the kids to school, to summer camp, to wherever. But I'll tell you what, if people are going to travel and it's less than whatever, AAA says the kind of break point is between getting in a car or getting on a plane, a couple hundred miles maybe, the option of getting on a plane is even more expensive. So
it is. Some
people are still going to travel. They're going to bite the bullet. You said the price of gas in Ohio versus California, where I live, it's not $8, but it is expensive. And I drive a midsize SUV, and I just had my first $100 tank of gas.
Wow.
And I was like, really?
Yeah.
$100 to fill up my car?
That's a little itchy-owie.
It's a little itchy-owie, and there's a couple of maybe, trips around town that I said, I don't need to actually. Today maybe won't drive. But I think overall, we might see a stable vehicle miles traveled in the next 90 days. But for some of the reasons I mentioned, people are still going to get out. They're still going to drive, and we'll get a better view at what point and what price per gallon will people either stop driving or cut back. But like I said, if you've got to travel, like we're here for the Vision Conference, I flew in. There might be some trips, whether it's personal or business, might not take.
Right.
And if that's the case, I might just get in the car and drive.
Right. Well, also there's the hassle factor of getting an airplane too, and that whole thing, right?
That seems to be getting worse. I don't know why.
Yeah, you just experienced, right?
Yeah.
So Rick, as you know, it is tradition on DriveTime to do something we call the lightning round.
Yes.
So I'm going to ask you some questions, and you just give me a quick answer off the top of your head.
All right, let's go.
I think I know the answer.
Okay.
You've been in the aftermarket a long time. What's your favorite part about being in the aftermarket?
Oh, the people.
I knew it was your answer.
Well, it is.
Right.
It's fun walking into the hotel where we're here for the Vision Conference and just running into the gauntlet of people just saying hello.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's great.
I think this is our 112th drive time. And I'll bet you 90% of them, people talk about the people in the business, right? What's your go-to restaurant in La Jolla?
My go-to restaurant in La Jolla, well, I guess I have two answers. One, for the best tacos, City Tacos. If you're in San Diego, you got to go for City Tacos.
Okay.
And I like sushi. There's a place called Ken Sushi. So when you come out to San Diego, I'll take you to Ken Sushi.
We're going to Ken, all right.
Yeah.
Sounds good. I think I may know the answer to this too, but what's one skill, personal or professional, that you are always trying to improve?
It's golf.
Is there any way to improve on perfection?
Obviously, Bill, maybe you can answer this because you love to play golf. Why is it that we play golf and we continue to go out there and, there's just that one good shot out of 90 or 100 and we say, I'm coming back?
Because that's the one we think we're really capable all the time.
Yeah, and by accident, sometimes I hit it well and I'm like, I wish I knew how I did that so I could do it again. But golf is that, it's the journey, not the destination.
Definitely. Okay, this kind of relates, but if you could take a road trip anywhere, somewhere, where would you go?
Oh, if I could take a road trip, I would. I live in San Diego,
Yep.
and I want to drive up the Pacific coast. And there's a bunch of golf courses. Some I've played, some I want to play, but there's some courses on the coast that are kind of unknown. They're munis. I want to play some of those again. There's some courses, obviously Pebble Beach.
Oh.
There's a bunch of other courses on. If you're a golfer, you know Bandon Dunes in
Oh,
Oregon.
sure,
I've
yeah.
been there a couple of times, but it's right on the coast. So I just want to take a month or two and go on a slow drive, burn a lot of gas, and in my car, and play golf.
The aftermarket will love you.
Well, come on out, Bill. Let's do
All right,
it.
let's do it, man.
Let's do it.
I'm going to tell my
Bill
wife.
and Rick's a wonderful adventure.
We'll have a literal drive time. And I'll tell my, hey, dear, I've been going for 2 months playing golf with Rick Schwartz. I'll call periodically.
I love it.
Rick, great to have you on AMN Drive Time, sponsored by our great friends at Eischen.
Bill, thanks for having me back.